So, hi everybody, and welcome to the Trade Meetup. As you know, today we'll be talking about two articles. The first one is titled "Museum Directors Calls for Increased Funding for Scientific Collections to Save Lives," writing by Jackson Landers in 2016. And the other article will be Museums Need to Press the Reset Button and Become More Radical by Ben Luck in 2020. As you know, my name is Laura. I'm doing my Master in Museum Studies at UF. And this is my second year, and I'm very interested in learning about collections. And I started this club during the lockdown because I have realized about all the great literature that we have in collections, and I'm in my process to learn about it. So I would like to try to narrow down more my interests and be more realistic with the literature, because the the literature looks super interesting, but once you go to the reality, to the real world, is completely different. So it's nice to have this group where we can chat about it. So here we are, people with many years working with collections, or students like me who want to have this space to talk about, to ask questions, to let them ask your thoughts. And yeah, and feel free to participate. If you don't want to say something, it's okay too. You can be here, you're listening and learning, because I guess that in my opinion, I have been most of the time listening in my meetups, because it's great, the discussions that we have. So please introduce yourself very briefly. And yeah, so Carrie. And we have Carrie, is my guest host.
Hi. For those of you who I haven't met, I'm Carrie Harris. I am the club coordinator for the College of Sciences and Mathematics at Arkansas State University. And I also work with the natural history collections here on campus. And I'm the co-chair of the Spinach Emerging Professionals Committee. So I do a lot of work with clubs and students in collections. Next person.
I'll go ahead. Hi, everybody. My name is Gabriel Samariva. I am a master's student at the University of Florida in the biology department. I work primarily in the ichthyology collections with Laura, and I'm, also passionate about collections. My perspective is more from the research, as in just someone who, isn't day-to-day managing the collections, but who definitely benefits from their presence. And so I'll pass it on to John.
Hi there. My name's John Simmons. I know your name, Carrie, from Spinach. I don't think we've ever met before, but I've been a member of Spinach almost since their founding. I am currently a museum consultant based in the middle of Pennsylvania. But before that, I was at University of Kansas for 26 years as collection manager in herpetology and director of their museum studies program. Before that, California Academy of Sciences. So got a long track record in collections. What I do now is I mainly work with museums on collection issues. And there's actually two people on my end today. Julianne Snyder is sitting across the desk from me listening in. And she is the managing director of the Earth and Mineral Sciences Museum and Art Gallery at Penn State, and an associate research professor in Earth and Mineral Sciences. Hmm? Yeah, you can pop over and say hi. And so that actually, I know I'm not making you up and that you're a real person. So. Hi, I'm real.
Hi.
Okay, Marie.
Hi, my name's Marie, and I'm a curatorial assistant in geology at California Academy of Sciences. And I've been there almost 3 years. My master's is in museum studies. I graduated in 2016 from Johns Hopkins University. I also have a certificate in collections management and care from George Washington University.
Julianne has that same degree, the certificate from GW.
Oh,
She
cool.
went on to get a PhD after that, but that's what got her spurred to go to graduate school, was
Oh, that's awesome.
getting that certificate.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I used to be at CalAcad, but in the old building. I've not even been out to see your new building. I was back in the days when it was a quad with the dolphins in the middle. And
Right, yeah, yeah.
Nice. So cheers. And let's kick off the conversation. I don't know, Caris, if you would like to start with your comments, your thoughts about the readings.
Whatever you want me to do. This is my first one of these meetings, so I'm gonna follow your lead, do what you tell me to. So are we gonna start with one paper and then discuss the second paper later, or
No, I guess that we
all at
can
the same time?
like talk together about the articles. Yep.
Okay. So from my perspective, I sort of work with collections, but I'm not a collections manager, and I don't have much control over what happens in the collection. So I kind of would like to know from you guys, especially this article about museums need to press the reset button and become more radical. Like, how could we become more radical? Do you guys have ideas?
I think if looking at the first article, what they're talking about is the strength of combined collections rather than just one. Because they're talking about, for instance, the idea that you can use the collections to trace down the origin of hantavirus requires not information from one museum, but collection information from a lot of museums. And that's one thing that I think natural history museums have not done, is talked about themselves as part of a worldwide resource. And that is one way they can become more radical, is advocate more data sharing, and especially making data available so that if you're a researcher and you're interested in doing something like hantavirus, you don't have to jump through a whole lot of hoops to get to the data, that you can find it easier. Now, there are some websites like the Web of Life and some of these that make it a lot easier to do that, but those museums, those sites still present pretty basic data. They don't present the full kind of data you would need to do that kind of study. So I think that's one radical thing, is quit being islands and think of ourselves as an interconnected community. And going again back to that first article, they talk about the hantavirus paper, which came out in 1993, which is very good. There have been several other papers similar to that, where they have taken the data from multiple museums and used it to try to track down things. He mentions tracking down the Zika virus. Well, there's also failures that have been done. When I was at Kansas, Townsend Peterson, who was still is the curator of ornithology, was very involved in these efforts. And that is about the time that Ebola broke out. And so Town had worked on the hantavirus group. And so he had the idea that we should try the same thing with Ebola virus to see if we could identify the carrier of the virus. And what he found very quickly was we can't do it because there aren't enough collections in museums worldwide from Central Congo. We just do not have the specimens. So there's a problem to be corrected, which is we're not collecting evenly around the world. We really need those collections in order to do that kind of thing. And again, that goes back to being more radical, working together to target where museums go out and look for specimens, and certainly involving people in the countries that we work in. So if I could be a little personal here, my first experience in the field was in 1971. I went off to live in the Amazon for a year and do field work. And I was in the Amazon of Ecuador. And at that time, there were very few museum collections in the country at all. And they were very poorly maintained. And the person that had the highest level of education had a master's degree, and it looked pretty pathetic. And we did not do much to interact with the people that were there. And as the years went by, I continued to work in Latin America. And what I saw was people getting concerned about the collections, people leaving the country and going to Europe or to North America to get PhDs, coming back home, raising their own PhD students. And then with the internet, suddenly the biggest problem, which was information accessibility, was solved. And we have seen a radical transformation in science in Latin America over the last 20 or 30 years. And so I still work in Latin America. I teach every other year in Colombia. But now when I go down, I find colleagues with PhDs, either from Colombia or from other countries, working together, maintaining their levels, their collections at the same level as anyone else in the world does, and working as part of a universal group of scientists that are all pretty much working on the same level, which to me is a very radical change. It's a change I did not see coming, and I never would have predicted, because you still have terrible economic inequalities between Europe and Latin America, Europe and the United States, and what people are paid in Latin America. But you have this phenomenal amount of science being done. And I think we are on our way to being more radical in that sense, but we could do a lot more to link up with our colleagues. If you go look at the big databases that compile data from collections, you'll find huge gaps in where those collections are. And they are in Asia to some degree, Africa to a very high degree, and then not very many Latin American collections are connected up, but they should be. They have data, they have good specimens, they have scientists perfectly capable and working at a world level. So that to me is another radical step. We should quit thinking of we go in the field and collect things and bring them back to our institution and we're done. We should be thinking in terms of we're working for a global enterprise of connected museums. So that's my little soapbox for it.
I think that's wonderful. Something I've noticed is that, at least here at Arkansas State, a lot of the classes used to have the students make collections, and now they've moved away from that. So we're making new collections in botany and in entomology, but nothing else.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. We are not training people to make collections, and we're also not telling people that work in collections is intellectually rewarding. We're not telling people that you can be a collections manager and have a terrific, exciting, interesting career. But that is a big problem. And I've actually written a book on collecting, on its herpetological collecting and collections management. And it's the only thing out there to tell people how to go out and prepare scientific specimens. There is no modern equivalent for fishes, for birds, for mammals, for any of the other ologies. It's just that one. And it's not that big a thing to do, but it's enormously helpful if you have not collected before. But yeah, we're not training people to go out in the field and make collections. We're not explaining what the importance of those collections is in the long term.
Absolutely.
So how do we fix that?
That's a great point. So in the ichthyology collections here at UF, historically, we've been primarily focused on Florida freshwater fishes, and then we acquired the University of Miami's huge marine collection, several decades ago. And the thing is, you'd expect the University of Florida's ichthyology collections, the second largest ichthyology collection in North America, to have pretty much anything you could want as far as, tropical marine things that you find along the coast. But our tissue collections are actually pretty poor. And so on my part, I've tried going out on my own and making collections along the coast, trying to build our tissue repository. And like you said, John, when it came to learning how to make these collections and preserve tissues and take notes and all that, I learned it all from Larry and Rob, our curator and our collection manager, but there is no manual that I have that I can refer to if I'm ever in the field, and so some of this is learning along the way, like learning to cut a hole in a large cowfish before you put it in a jar of formalin. Otherwise, it's going to burst in your hot car and you'll have cowfish guts all over the jar. But The other issue I have with it is that our research in our lab is not at all focused on Florida fishes or even fishes of North America anymore. We just came out with a book that is a photographic atlas of fishes in the freshwaters of Florida, but that's primarily just kind of a field guide. You know, we're not doing any research, any active research on Florida freshwater fishes. All our research is in Thailand with freshwater fishes from Thailand. So we, you know, our lab has been doing yearly collecting trips there, bringing specimens back, and then writing a lot of taxonomic paper from those specimens. We have many colleagues and co-authors from Thailand, but it's a similar problem there where their collections, several of the ones we visited while we were there to take measurements, were in various states of disrepair. There were some that were well taken care of, but Thailand is definitely paying more and more attention to their collections, but it's so hard to access to know what they have. I don't think any of them have an online database that you can go to and see what specimens are available. It's I like what you said as far as we donate all the holotypes we designate back to Thailand. We repatriate them so that they have the holotypes. If anybody wants to look at them, they have to travel to Thailand just to ensure that they're getting the recognition for the taxa that are indigenous to their country. But
go ahead.
Oh, the difficulty I have is like, should I be building our collection more? I mean, tissues certainly, but every time I go collecting, we get a bunch of stuff that we've already, like mosquito fish and warmouths are two things that make up a huge percentage of our collection. And, we're running out of more and more space. We've just got this new collection building that's going to be built soon. And Laura has had a huge hand in helping with the planning the transition. But, how much should I be building our collection versus how much should I be just focusing on helping out in the country where we do our research with their collections?
Well, a couple of comments, one of which is the people like your curators and what have you do not have to necessarily be doing research on a particular area to have a collection in that area that's valuable. They can be doing any kind of research if you are making collections and housing them properly and getting them online. This is the thing about being a world resource, is if you think of yourself as a museum that is only focused on freshwater fish from Florida or only focused on fish from Thailand, I think that's kind of wrong-headed. You need to think of, well, that's where our research focus is, but we do acquire, we do take in like tissues, particularly from these other places. When you have a well-known fauna like South Florida, or Florida, rather, it's easy to make collections of tissues and have those be valuable. If you're working in a place like Thailand, those tissues really need to be vouchered because you're probably running into a lot of new species. So, there's different levels of that, but just because you don't have people working in that area doesn't mean you can't collect in that area and have a valuable resource made available to other people. Thailand is the only Asian country I happen to be familiar with. I've done two fieldwork twice there, because my nephew did his PhD in Thailand. So I went over to give him a hand in the field. And while I was there, I did a week-long collection care workshop at the university there. And we had a very good turnout, but that was it. That's the only time they've ever had a workshop. And this is a workshop that I developed with a colleague from Colombia, and we have done many, many times in Latin America. A week-long workshop on how to take care of natural history collections. And we've done it in Thailand, but never in the United States. No one's interested. No one's willing to pay for it to have people come. So there are things you can do. And one of the things is when people go off to Thailand to collect, they can do similar things like present a workshop. Spend a half a day or a day, or if you've got more time, explaining how to improve your collection care, looking at what local materials you can use to make your collections better. It's really pretty easy when you get down to it. I had the opportunity in Colombia. We started our workshops in Colombia because my colleague, Janet Munoz, who's at the National University in Bogota, is from Colombia. So we started there doing workshops at the Humboldt Institute. And a few years later, I was hired by the Institute to go visit a bunch of collections in Colombia because I was an outsider and it was a little bit political. If you have a natural history collection in Columbia, you're required to be registered with the national government. But if someone had shown up from Humboldt, there would have been a little rivalry between institutions. So by hiring an outsider to come in and talk to people, it made it a lot easier to do. And I did not expect it, but I ran into all sorts of people that had been in the workshops we had done. And they would all say, oh, I'm so glad you're here. Look, here is what we did after you and Jeanette told us what to do. Here's the improvements we made. So I saw, this is amazing. And what, because you always wonder, do people really listen? And sure enough, things had been implemented and collections had been improved. So this is a solvable problem. But in all the years, and I started doing this the workshops in 1997, I have never found funding for them, ever. Every one we have done is because somebody at some university, typically in Latin America, scrounged up the funds to pay for plane fare and brought me in and we did the workshop. But that's kind of sad. And that's one of the problems with articles such as this one that we were reading today, is there's no mention in there about funding. There's no talk in there about where do you get funding for just your basic day-to-day collections care. If you want to digitize a collection, there's money everywhere, but digitization doesn't take care of your specimens. But if you want to catalog everything and get it up to date and get good storage furniture and do all of those basic steps, there's no one that's going to pay for that. And that's a big problem. So another radical thing is international sources of funding for collections care and collections building. Why not?
Yeah, for example, this year I began my project in the ichthyology collection, and I'm the only one there with a background in museum studies. So at the beginning I was feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing here, because I was feeling like do I need a background in biology? Because at the beginning it was so complicated try to do something, and Rob the manager is awesome, but he has been there for many years, so he talks super fast and he knows how to do the things, but it's like, no, just hold on, we need to write down the procedures. So now I'm helping them writing a procedure about how to change over to ethanol, what is the best jars, the best lids, the best gaskets. So the idea is to write down all these documents. And also everything has changed a lot, and I like to be here because I'm experiencing that really is very important to have interdisciplinary staff. Even if you don't have this background in biology, is okay, I don't need it, because all the researchers are using the collection, but who is taking care and managing the collection? Because I feel that the curator and the manager have many things to do, but the manager also has to care and manage this collection. So, and also in my collection management class, I'm learning all the theory, and it was like, okay, but how I'm gonna apply the, for example, about something very specific about collections management. And if you ask to someone else, it's like, I don't know, because I feel like most of them has been doing research, but yeah, we need more people training in collections and how to care about how to care the collections. So, and I feel that it might be from the new generations, working with the biology department or with the specific type of collection. Yeah, so, and also maybe other things that we can make the collection more radical is doing outreach, as we were talking, training and doing professional development. So, and also change those old established practices, like transform the conversations. So how we can change like the old tradition practices and how and like this interaction, like when we integrate the knowledge, like museum studies and the people who know about fishes. So yeah,
Yeah, so I agree. Something that I've noticed is that a lot of our curators, at least at places like Arkansas State, we're not a super large university. We don't have large collections and we don't have separate collection managers. We have the faculty who got hired to do research in ichthyology or something, and they inherited a collection along with it. And so hopefully they've had training in their undergrad or graduate program somewhere where they learned how to maintain a collection, because they certainly don't have collections backgrounds specifically. And when they're hired, it's like, it's the job description sometimes says, oh, it would be nice if you could also manage a collection. But that's not like the emphasis. So I am concerned with like the current generation of students coming through these classes and not getting a lot of collections management training. So maybe we could start from kind of the bottom up and put some more collections management ideas back in some of our courses. And that's kind of what our collections clubs do too. We encourage students to get involved with collections, and so they learn about collections management through experiences while they're in undergrad. And a third thing is that with Spinach, I'm involved with the Spinach Professional Development Committee, and something the entire time I've been a member of Spinach, something I've been telling the Professional Development Committee is that we need to do a better job at providing professional development opportunities to people like this. Like, you know, I think a lot of people at Spinach have been members for a really long time, and they don't consider that there are people who don't know how to change the ethanol in their jars. And so they don't really want to do a professional development workshop on something like that, because they're like, no one needs to know that. We all know that already. And so what we've been working on from the Emerging Professionals Committee, kind of encouraging through the Professional Development Committee, is that we need to start creating more of these opportunities, even virtually, for people to just join in and let us know what they need help with, and provide experts who can come in and show them what to do.
Yes, my like thought about this is maybe like more basic, and just that, like, what does radical mean? Because I feel like the word radical is going to mean something different to each person. Like when I think of making museums more radical, and specifically science museums, I think more about like anti-racism and diversifying our staff and anti-racist training, rather than like the collection and how to like radicalize and diversify the collection and field work. And I think that like is kind of going along the lines of like training and students. Like, speaking from my personal experience, the way I got my job was not only through school, which is inherently very expensive, so that's already exclusionary, is like I volunteered and I interned, and it's like, who can afford to do that? Like, I was in school and volunteering and interning because I, like, honestly, I had parental support, and not everyone has that. So how do you give those volunteer and internship opportunities, you know, where you're not getting paid? And we all know students need to get paid to survive and live. So like, how do you provide those opportunities to students who like need an income?
Those are really good points. The diversity issue particularly is big in museums right now. the American Alliance of Museums is devoting a lot of their resources to trying to figure out the problem, but not getting terribly far very fast. And that's not a criticism of them, because they are trying. It's a statement. And the museum field is one of the least diverse fields I know of. There are very few people of color in the field. And I think you've hit on a lot of the key reasons. Volunteering for internships is an old tradition in museums, and that probably intentionally excludes certain elements of the population that were not wanted in the past. And one thing that we can do, and for instance, I'm on the board of ARCS, which is the Association of Registrars and Collection Specialists, and we have issued a statement calling for paid internships. And we differentiate when we list an internship on our website, whether it's paid or not. Some organizations have gone so far as to say they will not list unpaid internships because that excludes people. We haven't done that because some small museums cannot afford to pay interns.
Right.
And so we accept the fact that unpaid internships can be a benefit sometimes, but our emphasis is on getting people to pay interns a living wage. And I think that's an important thing to do. But I think the problem, especially in the sciences, is that at what point do we start trying to attract people to the field? And if you're in high school, are you aware of what jobs there are in museums?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
probably not. So I have a friend that went through about 15 years worth of movies and murder mysteries, looking at the roles of museums in popular culture. And she did this as a joke, but it had a serious thing too. And what she discovered looking at the movies and murder mysteries, that she looked only at things that involved murders, was that there are only 3 kinds of people that work in museums: directors, curators, and security guards. And that's it. No one else works there. No one takes care of the collection. No one is an educator, just those 3. And usually the director is evil and the curator dies and the security guard gets killed off early in the film or the book. But this is a problem. We don't have any way in our popular culture to present what museums do. And think what for instance, a situation comedy set in a museum might do. It might make people aware of that. And I think part of that goes back to outreach, which a couple of you have talked about. And we should be doing a lot more to get programs into elementary schools, into junior high level, when the kids are fairly young, and saying, look, there's all these careers you can do. You don't have to get a PhD. You don't have to do all this stuff, but you can still work in science in a museum. And these things involve training, which you can get, but they're really interesting things to do with your life. And we're not really doing that. But I think we really need to start with them young.
In middle school and elementary school, like I remember taking field trips to museums. I'm in the Bay Area, so it was like Oakland Museum, SF MoMA. I probably went to Cal Academy as a kid too.
Yeah.
I had parents that were taking me to museums in our free time, but I'm in like a predominantly white, affluent suburb of Oakland, and I can probably guarantee you that a lot of those, like kids in Oakland were not having that same experience and that same exposure to museums from a young age. So unless they were in private school. So like, how do you start changing that from a younger age? And then I also put into the chat a statement that our research division at Cal Academy has written recently with our commitment to our various commitments to anti-racism and the trainings that we're going to start providing institutionally.
Absolutely. No, so here at the Florida Museum, we've had a similar initiatives being put forward by some really wonderful people here. So I'm actually at 5 o'clock, I'm going to be participating in one of our AIF Academics for Black Survival meetings. We had this training over the summer put together by some of our very own race scholars here at UF. And I didn't participate in the one over the summer, but the people who did are now leading this second round of training. And it's incredibly eye-opening. We're reading a book by, her last name is Saeed. I can't remember her first name though, Layla Saeed. And it's fantastic. I mean, really eye-opening, confronting your internal biases and things like that. And it's really gotten me thinking about, the Florida Museum's role. We do a lot of outreach in our own community here in Gainesville, which is super important because, the east side of Gainesville is lower income, primarily Black, and we don't see many of those kids coming to UF, which is really unfortunate. But coming from South Florida, I live in Broward County, which is just about an hour north of Miami. When I think of where there's really a dearth of this kind of, you know, understanding of what a museum does and how it works, South Florida, growing up there, I didn't even know how research operated until I came to UF. I'd always been interested in natural history, but there was no outlet for me growing up. And it wasn't until I met the professors here at the university that I really took off with my career. And so there are some museums in Miami. Specifically, I'm thinking of the Frost Science Museum that recently opened up. It has a big aquarium there that's really wonderful, but the exhibits aren't, it's not a collections-based museum. These are exhibits-based museums. They don't have any kind of active research going on. And so there was also a science museum older in Fort Lauderdale called the Museum of Discovery and Science. It's a children's museum that is not collections-based. So growing up, my idea of a museum was just a place you go and they have animals, almost like a zoo. You know, they have some fun interactive exhibits and stuff like that, but nothing like the Florida Museum, where you come here and we have not only exhibits that you can interact with, but also sections that are devoted to the research that goes on here and what we're actually learning about the natural world. And so to the purpose of opening up the world of museums and curating, I've been considering kind of doing kind of like a little traveling outreach wagon almost down to South Florida and going to some of the high schools, like the high school I went to, where there's nothing like that. You know, there is no kind of interface with researchers at a natural history institution. So it's an exciting time, I think. And I definitely, when we talk about being more radical, I hope that's kind of what we're hoping to see, what will happen, what more people will do.
Yeah, I think that with the pandemic, we have been realizing about all the things that we should change in our field. And yeah, and I see like the outreach super important, because it's the way how we can show to the new generation about this things that we do in collections, and that collections really exist, uh, and also like make more aware to the people of those millions of specimens that we have, and also how we can contribute to the future. So especially about like this first article uh, about how to make a better relation um, with public health offices. So yeah, I consider super important the reach, and also like being able to have like interdisciplinary staff in this outreach activities is very important, because like you people can be more aware about, yeah, we have scientifics here, but we have also like these disciplines, and you can be part of this. Or also we have for example, now we are doing an activity for a book for underrepresented communities in Gainesville, and the book is called Girls Do Science. So I'm gonna be participating, doing an activity, and the children going to learn how ichthyology collection preserve the specimens in alcohol. So we plan this activity, and it's very interesting, like doing this activity with an ichthyologist professional, but at the same from my perspective. So which is very interesting, because like I can give my opinion about fishes, but from my yeah, like my point of view. Yeah.
What age group will you be working with?
The activity will be for families.
Okay, so you'll be
Yeah,
covering a wide range then of children's ages.
yeah. The idea is they will do like pickles, and they will do their own label. which is also important. For example, in this procedure, we have the label, but in this procedure, I'm gonna be explaining what means each field in the label, which is important because like the first day that I go to the collection, I saw this label and it was like, I don't know what is this. So when I was talking with the manager, we need to really explain this. And he was like, why? But I know what is this. It's super clear. Don't you? I was like, no, I don't know. So this kind of things is important, and like to also it's a way how you can be like attract more the people, and not like to put this wall, like we have this huge collection with this labels that no one understand, or with catalogs that no one understands. So also it's like how we can yeah, like attract more people and don't feel then, yeah, that you don't believe here, because I don't know, when I heard like scientific collection, it's like, wow. So yeah.
You know, that kind of thing really, I think, captures the attention of people. And when you're young, you get interested in that sort of thing. And I think that's really what we need. I remember there was a study done a number of years ago in Washington, D.C., where they brought elementary age children in from some disadvantaged neighborhoods to work at the National Gallery. And most of them only made one visit to the museum, but they got to do all sorts of hands-on stuff while they were there. And in the study, they did a follow-up for like 10 years after. So they followed these kids up until they were in their 20s when they were adults. And they found that the majority of them still went to museums, and that their cohorts were not. So it's that one museum experience actually changed their whole attitude about whether they were welcome in museums or not. And that was just with a one school activity, but something more intense like what you're talking about is really interesting. I see that Desiree has made an interesting contribution in the chat, and she has talked about the idea of radical also meaning sustainable, which, there you are, hello. Which is, I think, is a good point, because I was complaining earlier about lack of funding for things, and that certainly is a part of sustainability. And so maybe that's another aspect of being radical that we need to think about is how can we sustain how can we have collections that are more sustainable so you're not constantly worrying about funding, and so that you can do more activities.
Yes, and I also linked to the course that I'm in. Apologies for missing all the introductions. I don't know how many of you are enrolled right now, but there's some great lessons on there if you have free time to watch some of the videos. You know, this week we're discussing contemporary ideas, so health and well-being in museums, and you know, how we can use collections to share exploring cuisines and local plants, and you know, going on the landscape and pulling back to those museum collections and how they reflect to our current setting now. And then also the decolonialization that's being pushed through museums right now, and then climate change and sustainability as well. So it's been a great course, and it's all virtual. So, you know, obviously in our COVID world, everything's virtual now, but how can we connect students? And we just have to put more things online, you know, and do those outreach components you had all mentioned. But great discussion. Thanks, everyone.
I think along the lines of things being virtual and online too, you also have to ensure that people have access to that. A lot of people don't have consistent, reliable internet. They don't have computers. I know with like school being virtual now for most students in the country, like accessibility is also a huge issue. Maybe everyone in the family is sharing one computer and 3 kids are in school. So how do you manage that? So I think we also need to think about, yeah, just accessibility to all these virtual offerings too.
Normally we would utilize libraries to connect people, but with things closed off, how, you know, how do we do that? Do we apply for grants to get more Wi-Fi boxes to
Right.
share with, you know, community members. I don't know with schools, how many schools are actually trying to share that wealth of the Wi-Fi, but you know, being in some places you can't access them in buildings if you're in a cement building.
Mm-hmm.
An obstacle we all have to hurdle.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's something like the museum community, if that's our responsibility to solve, but it's just something that, you know, I've been thinking about, like, especially with the academy having so many like virtual programs now. It's like, okay, that's great, that's wonderful, but like, you know, Google and Apple are here in our backyard. Like, maybe you should, like, is it our responsibility to go to them and say, like, hey, are you guys, you know, giving students Chromebooks and they're helping to provide internet that's reliable? Like, I don't know if that's our responsibility. It's just something that I've thought about a lot
It's
this whole
probably
time.
not so much our responsibility, but it's something we can add pressure and support
Sure.
to have happen. And, you know, museums can't do everything,
Right.
but on the other hand, if you were making your programs available for free and offering them only to places that provided them with, for instance, in combination with low-cost Wi-Fi access
Mhm.
or something like that, you know, there are ways to pressure in a positive sense
Mhm.
to pressure to get what you need. And yeah, I think that access is a huge problem, not just computers, but just getting Wi-Fi. I live in rural Pennsylvania, where I happen to live in a town where fortunately we have Wi-Fi available, but it's not inexpensive. But we get it through the cable company. But if you go just through 2 or 3 miles out of town, you're having to pay through satellite. In rural Pennsylvania, trust me, people do not have the money to pay for satellite Wi-Fi access. So that's a whole population that's getting left out. And I think it's very similar to inner cities and economically depressed areas. When you line up your expenses, Wi-Fi is probably not high on your list. You know, housing, food, clothing your children, those things are, you know, going to come first. And so what can we do to make Wi-Fi more available? Maybe museums should look at trying to be Wi-Fi hotspots and use some of their lobby area or parking lot to allow people to access the internet that way. And in return, your museum could have its programs available through those connections to make them more available to people. I don't know, there's bound to be ways to do it to at least help solve the problem.
I think another place you can apply pressure is at the state level. Like I don't know if they're still doing it, but in the spring, when all of our schools were online, the governor made some kind of deal with internet companies so that all students had access to internet. Supposedly, I don't know how it worked because my kid wasn't in need of that. But there was talk about how to get free Wi-Fi if you needed it, and that kind of thing can happen at the state level too. So, and a lot of schools are sending out Chromebooks and stuff like that from the school level.
Well, you know, back in the 40s, when electricity was available in the cities but not in the rural areas, I think it was in the 40s, rural electrification, or was that the 30s? I think it was the 40s. The 30s. The federal government went on a rural electrification project. And what they did was they cut deals with the electric companies saying, yeah, we'll give you the right to run your electrical lines down the street, but in return, you have to run lines out to the rural areas. And in those days, that was pretty expensive. That's copper wire going out on the lines. And what they did was they forced the electric companies, and then later they forced the telephone companies to provide the same service for rural populations as for urban at the same price. And, you know, it cost the companies more to provide it in the rural areas, but because of the population size, they didn't lose any money because they still gained customers, and most of the city customers were paying. But we've never tried Wi-Fi-ification of the United States. It's kind of silly that we're moving all this stuff as even government functions to Wi-Fi, but no one is making a move to have Wi-Fi available nationwide to all populations. And that's kind of absurd. Maybe we should be pressuring not just state, but the federal government to let's do this. If we're all going to communicate by Wi-Fi, then we should be providing Wi-Fi to people. It's like we've decided years ago we're all going to communicate by the written word, so we made public schools available to everyone. And is there really a difference? This is the main means of communication. And you know, you're having Wi-Fi in your library, local library's fine, but it can only hold so many people. Why not make Wi-Fi a standard utility that everybody should be able to get?
That's a good point. I guess I've never really understood why Wi-Fi is not just like a utility in the same sense as electricity and water and like.
Because it's private, people pay for it, and we're
Yeah.
a capitalist society. But we can be a capitalist society and still provide these things.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's absurd. It hasn't happened because we haven't thought about it, because no one has said this is a real serious problem. You know, I've heard a few politicians bring it up, the Wi-Fi gap, or the digital gap, I guess is what they call it, isn't it? But has anyone ever addressed it seriously? Because it used to be, you know, you were looking at the price of a computer, was it going to be so expensive? But nowadays, everybody's practically has a phone.
Right.
You know, people have shown they're willing to buy their phone. Why not give them Wi-Fi to go with their phone? You know, you buy their phone, you'll get Wi-Fi. And that would link everybody up.
I do really like the idea of museums being able to use their free programs as leverage to encourage changes like that happening.
Worth a try.
We are coming up on our hour. Do we want to do final remarks?
Yeah.
So I've really enjoyed this. This was my first meeting and I'm excited. I hope that there are more because I'll certainly join in from now on. It's been really great. It's been great to meet you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here and at least have this space where we can talk about collections, about our worriness, about all these new chains that also I feel that the pandemic has broke. So yeah, so thank you, and I don't know if someone else wants to say
Well, thank you, Laura, for arranging this, and to Carrie for co-hosting today. And I hope it's really nice to meet the rest of you. And Desiree, I believe we've met before in a class, haven't we? Online, but not in person. So I hope everybody else will participate in the future ones too. This is what, the third one, Laura, that you've done? And they've all been really interesting. And so I tell your friends to join in, and because, you know, I think this is the level at which this conversation on these topics needs to get started, and then it needs to spread, and particularly among those of you who are younger professionals. You know, this is your great opportunity to make a change in the world, to leave things different than when you came in.
Yeah,
and I think that's, you know, because I'm getting near the end of my career, and I tend to, you know, have that old guy thing of looking back. But when I look back and I see when I started as a collections manager back in the 70s, what has happened to the field, we made a lot of changes for the better. We didn't get everything done we wanted to, but you know, you see that you can actually do that. A small group of dedicated people can make those changes. And so, you know, my generation had its shot. We did what we could, but it's now up to you guys, the younger generation, to do things. But you know, it doesn't take that many of you, and you can do it. You can really make things happen.
Yeah, I feel that museums are kind of overwhelming, but at the same time, they are very like manipulable. I don't know if it's okay. Like you can make a change, so you can like try to bring the people together and make change. For example, John is one of my mentors, and we have been discussing a lot from many things. And it's like, John, I don't understand this and this. I don't know. I don't know if I can do this, but it's like all the time John giving me the support. And yeah, for example, having this kind of space is great because we can discuss, and I feel that I can have more clarity about the knowledge that I have been learning, but also how we can bring up this to the reality and share our thoughts about it. Someone else would like to say something?
Yeah, this was fantastic. Thank you, Laura and Carrie, so much. It's really nice to talk to people in very different parts of the country. I feel like I'm in an echo chamber sometimes here because we're all Floridians, and we all well, Laura isn't, but anyways, this was great. I definitely have some new perspectives now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. This was really fun and engaging, and thank you for hosting and putting it together. Definitely try to make the next one too, because I think, yeah, these are always just so informative, and like you say, like it's good to kind of get outside of your echo chamber and get different perspectives from across the country, because it's so easy, even within the academy, like I don't know what other collecting departments are doing, it's so easy just to be siloed within your own institution. So having a broader perspective is always really helpful.
Mhm. Yeah.
All right, guys, I gotta get off, but it's great meeting you all.
All right.
Have a good rest of the week.
Bye.
Thank you, Carrie.
See you again,
Thank
Carrie.
you. Bye.
Bye bye.